the social media has taken everybody's by surprise. I wrote an article about after Tunisia saying why Syria will not be Tunisia. And I went through an analysis that sort of went 1, 2, 3, 4. It got some people mad. A lot of the opposition people in Syria got mad and came and yelled at me because I was saying it won't happen in Syria for a number of reasons, some of which were because of oppression and repression. But others were to do with the weakness of the opposition, the fact that the youth in general like Bashar al-Assad. He's young. He's only 45 years old, unlike Mubarak, who's 83, the 0.03% of the Egyptian people are in his age bracket. There's less than 1% of Egyptians that are over the age of 83. But with Bashar, young people identify with him. And they think he's a reformer. They'll criticize people around him, but they generally like him. He's got a pretty wife, he's got cute kids, he comes down, he tries to be of the people. He goes to dinners in restaurants in Damascus. He drove when Pelosi went to Damascus to sort of break the embargo on Syria. He drove her around town in his car without any security, for example. And he does things like this all the time, thinking he's a man of the people and trying to win the hearts and minds of the young people. To some extent, he's been successful. He's also anti-American, which helps him a lot. But there is a hard core of people in Syria who don't like him. They're frightened, and the police have been very effective. Syria is depoliticized. But that's changing extremely rapidly. I wrote that article, let's say it's 3 weeks ago now, and I've already begun to have second thoughts and change my mind because things have changed so rapidly that you don't know what will happen. And people did not turn up for the original Day of Rage in Syria. But since then, there have been 2 demonstrations. One was when, theoretically, a guy got beaten up by police. Now, the Syrians have later denied it, put out these long things that he was yelled at, he wasn't beaten up, this sort of thing. But the Syrians are out there trying to do damage control. There was a big demonstration in downtown Damascus in a very Sunni part of the city, because that's the natural opposition to an Alawite president. And 1,500 people came out, and they were yelling, Syrians will not be humiliated. They didn't say anything against the president, which would put them in a clear, over a certain barrier. But they were yelling and screaming. Now the Minister of Interior immediately came down and waded into the middle of all these people and began to, he managed to calm them down. They arrested the police officer, they took 100 measures. But then just the other day, there was a demonstration in front of the Libyan embassy. 200 upper middle class Syrian youth came out, obviously Facebook and so forth oriented, and began to say, support and will Gaddafi fall, let Gaddafi fall, and so forth. They brushed up against the notion of, should Bashar fall, but this no dictatorship. They didn't say no dictatorship. They were very careful not to say anything that could be directly associated with an anti-Bashar al-Assad line. But it was clear what they were doing, and the police were standing around them in big numbers, waiting for them to cross some barrier. But obviously very frightened, because once you hit those people, then you become like Gaddafi. And all the Syrian opposition are they're writing on my site saying, will Assad be like Gaddafi? Is he going to kill the Syrian people? And they all think he will. But that's the big question. Is he going to kill his own people to stay in power? And that's what everybody is asking, and they're pushing on it. That's the constant. So things can get out of control very quickly in a place like Syria. Even though a month ago, I would say there's no organized opposition. The people who are organized have been put into jail numerous times before. They're intimidated. They don't have parties. They have people who read what they write or know what they're doing because they're websites, but there's no organized party. The traditional line in a place like Syria was always that you could fill up a microbus. Most opposition leaders could fill up a microbus, and some of them a whole pulpit. And that was the joke in Damascus. But now you don't know what could be possible because Facebook, Twitter, and so forth have changed the rules of the game. Al Jazeera has been monstrous. And that's only really 15 years old, but it's really 10 years old or something in the sense that it's become really big in the last 10 years. It's been legalized in most countries. In a place like Syria, it was illegal to have a satellite dish. People did, under Hafez al-Assad, the father who died in 2000. The son legalized it. But everybody is watching Al Jazeera. And since the Tunisian thing broke out, there isn't an Arab household that's probably turned off Al Jazeera in the last month. Everybody is watching it, and everybody in the West started watching it. Most of my friends who never knew how to get Al Jazeera figured out how to go online and put Al Jazeera in Google, and then they can watch it live on their computers. And this is what everybody is doing. Both English and Arabic Al Jazeera, both of which are good. The Arabic one has just had live scenes at Tahrir Square or wherever the action is. They've had constant live. When Egypt has tried to take them down, beat up their reporters, muscle them, people began to send in video clips through the telephone lines, through email. And they were airing all the video clips that everybody's taking in. When the Syrian little demonstration of 1,500 took place, you can see every Syrian is holding up his phone, going like this, and you see this sea of arms with phones taken up there. And they're all sending them to Al Jazeera. And that's how we have all the YouTube and other clips of this demonstration. The only reason we know it existed, because the Syrians didn't write about it, was because it clogged up the YouTube lines, and then everybody began to carry it. Al Jazeera began to carry it and so on. So everybody knew there was a demonstration in Syria. And they could hear the slogans. And that's what we were all doing, is listening to what slogans and how daring do the slogans become. And everybody's pushing each other to go the next step. Okay, let me say turn away from social media. But it is. The media has changed. Without the media, this wasn't going to happen. It has happened, and it's caught like wildfire from one end of the Middle East to the other because of these new media. Economics. Economics is the underlying story here, and it's a big story. And we're just beginning to see the train leaving the station. We're going to see this, I think, in many, many other places in the third world. Commodity prices have been screaming up. Now that's good for Oklahoma because we produce commodities, whether it's gas or whether it's wheat or other things. And all of our farmers are going out and buying new tractors because they're going to count on these very high prices. But this is very bad for Egyptians because 50% of Egyptians spend half of their salary on food. The average basket of Egyptian food has gone up 20% this last year. 40% of Egyptians live on $2 a day or less. That's how the UN defines poverty. Severe poverty is $1 a day or less. In Syria, it's about 12% on $1 and 32% on $2 or less. So this is a big section of the population. They're living hand to mouth. They're spending most of their money on food. And all you need is a little bit of inflation, and it kills them. They're not getting that raise in salaries that's going to cover that. They don't have any way to cover that. And other things are being degraded. Their water excess, electricity, and so forth. So they have to buy water. In Syria, 40% of Syrians live in housing that's not built according to the law. This is housing that people who would come to the city from the countryside just build. It doesn't have running water. It doesn't have electricity. The state has not been able to keep up with this. It's a big slums, and they're squatting. So they don't have water. Water trucks have to go around these neighborhoods, and they sell water to the poor people. And you'll talk to any person who lives in these areas, and they're crying all the time because they say the water costs too much. So other things are going way up. Electricity, water, these prices which should be supplied by the state at fairly level things are not being supplied by the state. Anyway, it's very hard. People are suffering. And this is why the Tunisian fellow who burnt himself. He didn't have a job. He had had a university degree. He couldn't get a job, so he did the food cart of vegetables, but then the police overturned his cart and slapped him, or beat him up. He went to complain in some office, and this woman who he was complaining to slapped him and humiliated him. So you have a humiliation factor, which I'm going to come to at the end. But you have the economic difficulty underneath it all, which is the ultimately, perhaps the most humiliating part of the whole thing, is not being able to feed your family or yourself properly, and not get a job. So that's the underlying story, and it's going to come for a lot of the third world. Of course, we have the lucky few, the 20 or so countries that are pulling out of this, the Turkeys of the world, the Chinas, the Indias that are at least the top part of the population in those countries, where there is pretty good fast growth, 8-9%, and they're going to leave behind the rest of the poor. Now, of course, it's very uneven. Within a country like Turkey, you go to the east of Turkey, extremely poor still, so forth. But in the cities, there's a growing middle class. That, of course, is very uneven. And as China, India come online, they are driving the price of commodities up, because they are all eating meat for the first time in their lives. Hundreds of millions of people are now wanting meat. And of course, it takes bushels and bushels of wheat to grow one little cow. But you can't stop people from wanting meat, and if they have the money, they can buy it. And that's just middle-class eating habits are going to make people who aren't enjoying that kind of income increase are going to be much harder pressed.